shikues nderuar, mirë se erdhët në emisionin Betimi për Drejtësi. Sundimi i ligjit dhe lufta kundër korrupsionit vazhdojnë të sfidojnë mirëqenien e qytetarëve dhe rrugën drejt Bashkimit Evropian. Për këtë emision kemi vendosur të zhvillojmë një intervistë ekskluzive me ambasadorin Amerikan Kosovë, zotin Delawie. Intervista është e fokusuar në fushën e sundimit të ligjit. Në këtë intervistë ambasadori Delawie flet për nivelin e sundimit të ligjit në Kosovë, për ndikimin politik në sistemin e drejtësisë, për korrupsionin brenda sistemit të drejtësisë, për qeverisjen e Këshillit Gjyqësor dhe Këshillit Prokurorial, për nivelin e transparencës dhe llogaridhënies në sistemin e drejtësisë, për marrëveshjet e arritura mes Kosovës dhe Serbisë, për integrimin e serbëve në sistemin e drejtësisë dhe flet për pritjet e gjykatës speciale dhe po ashtu flet për atë se çfarë po ndodh me procesin e demarkacionit me malin e zi. Për të gjitha këto dhe më shumë do të ndisni përgjigjet e ambasadorit Amerikan Delawie në intervistën e zhvilluar nga kolegu e Miftaraj. Por para se të ndisni intervistën, të ndjekim rubrikën e monitorimit të rasteve të korrupsionit të përgatitur nga ekipi i emisionit Betimi për Drejtësi.
Shikues të nderuar, gjatë javës së kaluar prej 5 deri më 9 dhjetor, ekipi hulumtuese të Betimi për Drejtësi ka raportuar për 56 seancat e korrupsionit të caktuara nga të gjitha gjykatat themelore në Republikën e Kosovës. Prej këtyre seancave të caktuara, 40 janë mbajtur, ndërsa 16 seanca janë shtyrë për arsye të ndryshme. Këto janë rastet e korrupsionit të seancave të mbajtura dhe të shtyra gjatë kësaj jave. Në këto raste të korrupsionit janë përfshirë të gjitha profilet e personave të akuzuar. Nga 124 persona të akuzuar, 80 persona i takojnë profilit të ullët, 41 persona profilit të mesëm dhe 3 persona i takojnë profilit të lartë. Këta janë 3 personat e profilit të lartë. Për dallim nga javët e kaluara, gjatë kësaj periudhe raportuese janë shpallur 11 aktgjykime në rastet e korrupsionit. Ndiqni detajet e këtyre aktgjykimeve. Gjykata themelore në Mitrovica gjatë javës së kaluar ka shpallur 3 aktgjykime, prej të cilave një aktgjykim dënues dhe 2 lirues. Kjo gjykatë ka shpallur fajtor të akuzuarin për përvetësim gjatë ushtrimit të detyrës zyrtare, Hajdar Mejzinin, pasi i njëjti e ka pranuar fajsinë. Mejzinit ju shqiptua dënimi me burg efektiv në kosgjatje prej 4 muajve, i cili me pëlqimin e tij u konvertua në dënim me gjobë në lartësi prej 2400 euro. I njëjti akuzoi se si agent tregtar në kompaninë Union, në 4 raste i kishte marrë për vete parat për shitjen e mallit, e që bëhet fjalë për shumën në vlerë prej 4950 euro, prej të cilës të akuzuarit është kërkuar nga pala dëmtuar ta kthej vetëm 5% të saj. Ndërkaq, në një rast tjetër, kjo gjykatë ka liruar nga akuza për marrje të rishfetit zyrtarin në zyrën për patent shofer në Mitrovica, Afrem Gecin. Nga akuza për të njëjtën vepër penale është liruar edhe Esat Haxha, i cili akuzoi se ka ndërhyrë në njësorin elektrik të dëmtuarit Erol Syla, për të cilin shërbim ai kishte kërkuar nga i dëmtuari 2 herë shumën prej 20 eurove. Edhe gjykata themelore në Pejë ka shpallur 3 aktgjykime gjatë javës së kaluar. Në aktgjykimin e parë, kjo gjykatë ka dënuar me gjobë në vlerë prej 1000 euro, zyrtarin e Kecit Ervin Kastrati për veprat penale ushtrim ndikimit dhe mashtrim. Kastrati akuzoi se ka pranuar 3000 euro nga i dëmtuari Jetullah Rustemi, në mënyrë që të ushtrojnë ndikim mbi vendimarrjen e personit zyrtar, që brenda 3 ditëve të sigurojnë një transformator për të. Si dhe të dëmtuarit Rustemi i lëshon fatura kinse i ka shtyer borxhin e tërësi, ndërsa i dëmtuari më vonë pranon faturën me borxhin e përgjithshëm prej 7554.45 euro. Në rastin e dytë, gjykata themelore në Pejë ka dënuar me kusht 2 zyrtarët e komunës së Pejës, Shahim Belego dhe Sami Krasniqi, për keqpërdorim të pozitës apo autoritetit zyrtar. Belegu u dënua me 8 muaj burgim me kusht, ndërsa Krasniqi u dënua me 6 muaj burgim me kusht. Sipas pretendimit të prokurorisë, të njëjtit akuzoshin për dallavere me prona, duke nxjerrë vendime të kundërligjshme, madje në një rast prona publike bartët në pronë private. Ndërkaq, në rastin e tretë, gjykata themelore në Pejë ka liruar nga akuza për përvetësim gjatë ushtrimit të detyrës dhe friksim gjatë procedurës penale Elez Hajdarajn, dërsa nga akuza për veprën penale keqpërdorim të autorizimit në ekonomi Imer Haskajn. Gjatë shpalljes së aktgjykimit, u tha se nuk është vërtetuar se të lartë përmendurit kanë kryer veprat penale me të cilat ngarkohen. Gjykata themelore në Prizren ka dënuar me nga 1 vit burgim me kusht drejtorin e gjimnazit Gjon Buzuku në Prizren, Shai Budure, zëvendës drejtorin e këtij institucioni shkollor Beqir Letaj dhe ish kryetarin e këshillit të kësaj shkolle Bujar Nerjovaj për keqpërdorim të detyrës zyrtare. Këtë kishin bërë me rastin e përzgjedhjes së kompanisë fituese për ekskurzionin e vitit 2013, në atë mënyrë që kanë favorizuar kompaninë fituese, me që rasti kanë eliminuar drejt për drejt kompani tjera konkurruese. Ndërsa, kjo gjykat në një rast tjetër ka dënuar me 7 muaj burgim efektiv instruktorin në autoshkollën Geni në Prizren Pjetër Boqe, i cili akuzoi se kishte marrë rishfet shumë të mëdha parash për të ndihmuar kandidatët e tij që të kalojnë testin për patent shofer në mënyrë të parregullt. Gjykata themelore në Gjakov ka dënuar me 6 muaj burgim me kusht ish profesori në shkollës së mesme Kadri Kusari në Gjakov, Armen Tarani, i cili akuzoi se si profesor i kishte marrë 400 euro rishfet nga nxënësi Exon Morina. Këtë kishte bërë që të njëjtit ja mundsoi kryerjen e shkollës së mesme, gjë të cilën nuk e kishte bërë. Në një rast tjetër, kjo gjykat ka shpallur aktgjykim refuzues ndaj zyrtarit të Kecit Petrit Glogjani, i cili akuzoi për keqpërdorim të pozitës apo autoritetit zyrtar, keqpërdorim që sipas akt akuzës kishte të bënte me manipulim të njësorëve elektrik. Vendimi u mor pasi prokurori i çështjes Ali Uka hoqi dorë nga ndjekja penale ndaj të akuzuarit. Gjykata themelore në Ferizaj ka dënuar me 2 vite burgim të pandehurin Ramadan Kërçeli për veprat penale falsifikimi dokumenteve dhe mashtrim. Ndërkaq, ndaj 2 të pandehurve të tjerë në këtë çështje penale, Rahim Ahmeti dhe Erol Imami, kjo gjykat shpalli aktgjykim refuzues, pasi që prokurori Arben Kadriu u tërheq nga ndjekja penale ndaj tyre. Akta akuza kishte të bënte me dallavere që pretendoi se ishin bërë me shitblerje të palojtshmërive.
Ndoqët se si po trajtohen rastet e korrupsionit në gjykatat themelore të Republikës Kosovës, ndërsa tani ju ftoj të ndisni intervistën me ambasadorin Amerikan Kosovës zotin Delawie të zhvilluar nga kolegu e Miftaraj.
Dear Ambassador, thank you for your time for having this interview.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, last week we had Anti-Corruption Week organized by your embassy. We saw a mobilization of civil society, foreign embassies, and also partners that support Kosovo in rule of law and fight against corruption. We saw also last week numerous of activities that has been organized. How do you see this? How do you assess? What next?
Well, last week was an absolutely terrific week, and we were very pleased with the results of Anti-Corruption Week. Just our embassy sponsored, I think, about 25 different events, and then, of course, our NGO partners and other people in Kosovo did another couple dozen. So we were very pleased with the way things went. We were also very happy that the coalition of NGOs was able to kind of come together and to figure out some joint strategies on how to make progress on corruption. That was a very positive sign as well. The thing now is to keep the energy. My friend Ambassador Jan Bratu, head of the OSCE office, said the other day that every day needs to be Anti-Corruption Day, and that would be ideal. So we had a great week, but we can't kind of forget. We have to keep going, and we have to convert some of these terrific ideas and words into actual action that will improve the corruption situation in Kosovo. I can tell you the United States remains committed to this issue. And we're looking forward to seeing concrete progress on things like fiscal transparency and electronic procurement is an important part of that. Accountability, better accountability for judges and for prosecutors. An updated anti-corruption strategy that has real benchmarks and goals that can be measured and tracked. I think the main thing for people to recognize is that change on this just has to be driven by the citizens of Kosovo. Change has to come from within. Now, we're going to do everything we can to support, but really change has to come from the citizens of Kosovo.
You are almost for 2 years as a U.S. ambassador in Kosovo. When you came in Kosovo, your three priorities were also rule of law and fighting against corruption. What is your assessment with regard to the fight against corruption in Kosovo? Politics are proclaiming that corruption is only perception. Also, prosecution offices last week during the anti-corruption week, they stated that corruption is not in the measure which is proclaimed in media. What is your assessment on this?
Well, there's no country that's free of corruption, including the United States. And I think it's important to recognize there is a problem here. We had dozens of people were arrested for selling public property several months ago. That's a real corruption type crime. There are credible surveys of Kosovo citizens that indicate they believe that corruption is a serious problem. And to a certain extent, perception and reality can merge and become the same, especially if you're thinking of economics. Whereas if you're an investor, whether you're domestic or a foreign investor, and you think corruption is a problem, you're going to be reluctant to invest. So, perception and reality, they have to be dealt with. And the best way to get a perception is to deal with the reality. And no matter how much any country does about corruption, there's always more to do. As long as you have people, you'll have a tiny percentage that are involved in corruption. So there is always more work, even for the countries at the very top of the Transparency International list.
Besides that, United States is supporting rule of law in fighting corruption. Still, there are lack of results. What do you think when the situation can change, and who should take the lead to change the current situation in fighting corruption?
Well, it's important to build momentum and for people to work together and civil society to work together with government to a certain extent, with regular people who care about this issue. I'd have to disagree that there are no results. I mean, there are some results. We have had several senior government officials that were resigned when they were indicted for abuse of office. We had several parliamentarians who resigned when they were indicted for abuse of office. We had dozens of people indicted in the Stent case. We had dozens of people indicted or arrested for the sale of public property, case. So, it's important to acknowledge progress, when it happens.
When we can see judgments?
Well, once you have to arrest people before you can indict them, you have to indict them before you can prosecute them, you have to prosecute them before you can convict them. You got to start somewhere. And we just have to keep following all these cases. Civil society needs to do corruption monitoring, and I know KLI and others are doing that, and that's very important. And we are going to do our part, absolutely. We're supporting things like electronic procurement. We're doing training for judges and prosecutors, and we're supporting codes of conduct for things like ethics. So, we're trying to make the best contribution we can. But when will it change, you asked? I mean, it's going to change gradually. Not going to change like that, I'm afraid. And it's going to change when people say enough.
Recently was published also a country report of the European Commission for Kosovo. Mm-hmm. How do you see the recommendations and the inputs of such report?
This is the EU country report I think you're talking about. Yeah, I agree with an awful lot of it. I think it was a very good report. There are a couple things that stood out for me in the rule of law area. And one of the things they recommended was additional work by the government of Kosovo on asset forfeiture and confiscation of illegally acquired assets. That's important. They also pointed out the importance of the reform of the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, which deals with allegations of misconduct by prosecutors and judges. Certainly we agree with that. I think, once again, it's important to point out when positive things happen. The report also talked about improvements in dealing with violent extremism and terrorism cases. And, I think it's very important to acknowledge the good work of the Kosovo rule of law institutions. This report was written before the Albania soccer game incident. It was still very positive. I think the Albania soccer game incident, or potential incident really demonstrated the capabilities of the Kosovo police and other rule of law institutions to do good work.
Political influence in the judiciary system is emphasized in almost all local and international reports. How is politics influencing in judiciary? We saw also that politics are not providing enough budget resources for judiciary.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's kind of two main streams here I think it's important to talk about. One is visible influence in the judiciary, and then one is invisible influence. Visible influence in the judiciary is when parliamentary members of government or other officials say that a court or judge should make such and such a decision or should not make such and such a decision. Invisible, now the visible at least you can see, you can react to. Invisible influence in the judiciary is more insidious because you don't necessarily see it, and that's where people use personal or financial or some other means to influence the outcome of a case. Both of these are really bad, of course. Judiciary has to be independent of politicians. I mean, that's one of the fundamental tenets of democracy. But we also have to recognize that judiciary and prosecutors, they have to perform according to the law too. And that gets back to what I was talking to a minute ago about the importance of reform of the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, because misconduct has to be dealt with even if it is by a judge or a prosecutor.
Ambassador, what is your final message for politics with regard to the independence of the judiciary, Kosovo Judicial Council and Kosovo Prosecutor Council?
Yeah. I think the key thing to recognize is there's no magic wand for solving corruption in Kosovo or in any country. If I had one, believe me, I would use it. What has to happen is we have to push in 6 or 10 different directions at once using all the tools available. And we all have to work together on this. We're certainly doing our part, as I've explained. You're doing your part in monitoring and other activities. Civil society needs to continue to play a role, and citizens need to continue to demand improvements regarding corruption. Last week, we really turned up the volume, I think. I mean, the 25 events we did, others did, I mean, they were terrific. And as we approach the new year and the holidays, there's a risk that people kind of forget the energy. And please, don't forget the energy. We got to keep going on this. It's so important for Kosovo's future that we, see improvements in this sector. And, I can tell you, the United States remains committed to rule of law and to anti-corruption. And I am convinced that there is plenty of room for positive change. I'm not giving up on Kosovo, and I hope the citizens of Kosovo don't give up on it either.
Ambassador, Kosovo Law Institute monitors the corruption cases in almost all basic courts all over Kosovo. Based on the indictments that Kosovo Law Institute monitors in the field, it seems that government in Kosovo is pretty much corrupted. How do you assess this fact?
I have to say I would not go that far at all. I think that there are a lot of Kosovo government officials who are trying to do their best to implement the law the way it's written and are operating in an honest way. I think it's pretty clear that the Kosovo police is the most respected law enforcement agency in the Balkans. I think it is clear that the Kosovo Customs Service, which collects the vast majority of revenues disposed of by the Kosovo government, instituted a variety of procedures under the former Director General that kind of demonstrate no visible corruption. And this is the agency that collects over €1 billion a year for the Kosovo government to spend. So, it's important to recognize things like that are happening. So no, everything is not corrupt. Now, there are serious problems, absolutely. And I'm glad that KLI is monitoring basically all the courts across Kosovo. It's producing clear recommendations. And I certainly call on government and others to take seriously the recommendations that KLI and other non-governmental organizations produce. It's important to continue the dialogue, to continue working with civil society and government to try to improve the issues.
There have been no lack of policies in judicial system, procedural system in fighting criminality or corruption. However, such policies are not implemented in practice by judges and prosecutors. We saw that Kosovo Judicial Council and Kosovo Prosecutor Council, unfortunately, they are somehow consistently violating the law while they are exercising their functions. In the meantime, we saw that in KPC we have a member who has expired mandate. What's the message for the citizens by these two very important institutions?
Well, I can't comment on whether anyone in particular is violating the law or not. That is not my role. But I certainly think the KPC and the KJC have an extremely important role to play in promoting rule of law in Kosovo. They have to demonstrate the best possible behavior. They have to deal with misconduct issues. They have to make their decisions in a fair, transparent, and relatively predictable way. And they've got to recognize the example they set for the whole rest of the rule of law system in Kosovo and to behave accordingly.
The transparency and accountability of both councils, how it can be improved in practice. We saw the Ministry of Justice that is in the process of amending the law on disciplinary proceedings. Do you think that this can reflect to increase transparency and accountability of both councils, judges, prosecutors?
I think amending the law on the disciplinary council is extremely important. I understand the Ministry of Justice is rolling out some draft amendments to that law this week, and we certainly support that. There needs to be positive change there. I think it's also important for the councils to operate in an absolutely transparent way and to demonstrate by their actions to the citizens of Kosovo that they're working on their behalf.
We can change a bit now the discussion. We saw last week that Kosovo and Serbia finally they concluded agreement for integration of the North into the Kosovo system. What is your opinion regarding this agreement? We saw in the past that many of them has not been implemented in practice.
I am very optimistic about this agreement. It actually took a long time to get here, and there have been interim steps along the way that had to be executed, and they were executed. Starting, I think, January 10th, will open a new chapter for integration of Kosovo Serbs into the kind of whole judiciary picture in Kosovo. So I see this as very positive, both from providing a consistent level of rule of law support throughout Kosovo's territory, which is clearly desirable, but also it's a key element of extending Kosovo's sovereignty over its entire territory, which I regard as being very important.
The Special Court is already expected to file the first indictments. There have been many comments that this will affect the disturbance of the politics in Kosovo. How do you see the work of the court and effects in Kosovo after it will be functional and will have first indictments?
Well, I think the court and what comes from it are going to be very important steps for Kosovo on its path to full integration in European structures, which I've said numerous times is my goal for Kosovo. I have full confidence in the ability of the court to render justice for crimes committed during the war period in a fair, responsible manner. I have met the chief prosecutor, who happens to be an American citizen, and he seems like a very professional, serious person. And he's explained very well, I think, what his goals and objectives are going to be in a variety of public statements.
And the last question, demarcation with Montenegro is one of the criteria for visa liberalization between Kosovo and EU. There is a status quo in this process. What should government, Kosovo Assembly should do to proceed with this process?
I think it's important to recognize that the draft agreement with Montenegro basically codifies the border that has existed between Kosovo and Montenegro since 1974. It is the line that's referred to in the Constitution of Kosovo. So, it's the right agreement. I realize there are people that disagree with me, but it's the right agreement. As you said, the EU has made ratification of this agreement a condition of visa liberalization. I certainly support the ability of Kosovo to integrate in European institutions and have this ability to travel if the EU allows. It's not my decision, of course, but I think that Parliament should endorse this agreement, should ratify it. I would certainly encourage Kosovo citizens to talk with their parliamentarians and explain to them how important it is for them to fulfill the EU's conditions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Shikues nderuar, ishte kjo intervista me ambasadorin Amerikan Kosovë, zotin Greg Delawie, për fushën e sundimit të ligjit në Kosovë dhe luftën kundër korrupsionit. Ndihma e pakursyer e shteteve mike të Kosovës, sikurse Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës, në sundimin e ligjit po vazhdon pa ndërprerje. Fatkeqësisht, sistemi i drejtësisë në Kosovë ende po përballet me probleme dhe sfida të shumta, sidomos në luftimin e korrupsionit profilit lartë. Ekipi Betimi për drejtësi do të vazhdojë të monitorojë rastet e korrupsionit për të informuar publikun për luftën reale e cila po zhvillohet kundër personave të akuzuar për korrupsion. Shikues nderuar, të gjithë ju që keni vërejtje apo sugjerime, mos hezitoni të na shkruani në adresën tonë elektronike. Deri në emisionin e radhës nga unë Beti Musliu, mirëmbëjtje.